Hey, everybody, real quick before we jump into today's episode, two things I need to let you become aware of is number one, I am currently going through brain code centers for my neurofeedback therapy. This isn't a paid advertisement or anything like that. Had a great conversation with Angie during my onboarding and just figured that she would be a really, really good guess what you guys are going to pick up from that when we get into the episode. Number two is I've done my best for my side on my sound. For whatever reason, I don't know what happened, but the sound quality on my end is just not the greatest. So 1,000 apologies to you, the listener, and to Angie for this episode. So I've done my best to clean it up as best as possible. But I think you're still going to get a great deal of information out of this episode. So without further ado, welcome to Renegade Radio, the only radio podcast station that is meant for influencers and innovators, for those who are willing to disrupt and not conform to the system, for those who are misfits. This is season 002, episode 003 with Brain Code Center's Angie Noack.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another great episode of Renegade Radio. I am really excited for today's guest and conversation because, pun intended, I really do think this might be actually mind-blowing. Ladies and gentlemen, I have none other than Angie Noack here from Brain Code Centers, and we are going to talk about something which is not necessarily broadly known, but for some of my audience, you guys have kind of followed my journey, and you kind of understand this whole mental health stuff and some of the therapies that I've gone under. But anyway, I'm going to turn it over to Angie, and then I have no idea where this is going to go, ladies and gentlemen. So we're gonna travel on this journey together. Angie, welcome to Renegade Radio.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much for having me. Yes, my name is Angie. I am the senior vice president of Brain Code Centers. We are a brain mapping and neurofeedback company. And I'm so excited to be here and chat with you about it.
Yeah, I am really excited about this. I was even telling a client about it, about neurofeedback, and she said, "Oh, well, what do you do?" and so this is actually really timely because this means that I can now just share this episode with all my clients, and it'll make the explanation go by so much easier. But before we even dive into neurofeedback, Angie, I would love to have you just kind of explain your story. Where did you come from? How did you get into the mental health space and your story with neurofeedback?
Absolutely. So when I was 19, so I was always probably more neurologically based. I'm definitely like heavier science, probably more, left brain sided. But when I was 19, I had a skull fracture, traumatic brain injury, and experienced a lot of like physical issues, a lot of cognitive deficits. Fortunately, I am so blessed that I come from a very wellness-based family. My mom was very crunchy before it was cool to be crunchy. And she, when doctors were kind of saying, hey, this is probably as good as it's going to get, she said, absolutely not. We do not accept that. That is not the future, for my daughter. And so she went kind of on a deep dive into all of these different, more alternative forms of medicine so that I was able to find truly what I believe to be ultimate healing. And even, 10 years down the road after I had done a lot of healing, at first I was in a walker for a while and I, was walking on my own again. Neurofeedback kind of came in on the back end. And at that point, I was having really severe panic and anxiety, and then insomnia kind of left over from that brain injury. And neurofeedback was incredibly impactful for me and pretty life-changing. So it was definitely a part of my healing journey, kind of on the back end. But after I was probably in my second year of my master's program when I had a friend kind of introduce me to somebody in the field of neurofeedback. And it was like neurofeedback found me. I did not find it, but it resonated. And I was like, oh, this is what I'm supposed to do. And then as I got to teach and, work with and train people who were, struggling with anxiety, depression, trauma, but especially traumatic brain injuries, it definitely kind of was a full circle moment. And I realized, kind of why I went through what I went through so that I was able to work with people and impact them on a totally different level because of my story.
And if you don't mind sharing a little bit of your experience of the recovery process before you even found neurofeedback, because my own personal journey has been fairly, I'm going to use harrowing, but lightly. But it's challenging. It's so difficult because we can't see the brain, we can't manipulate the brain, right? And so it becomes really challenging to explain to those family, friends, people outside of, it's cognitively very difficult to operate. If you don't mind sharing just a little bit of what that process was like for you.
Absolutely. I call it kind of an invisible injury because people
Mm.
can't see it and you might be acting differently, but unless it's a very severe traumatic brain injury where maybe you had a shunt or something and your gaunt is a little bit slower, your verbiage, things like that, but if you look relatively normal and maybe we're going to use, could act relatively normal, people are like, you're good. And I was in a walker, so there was obviously something very wrong with me as I was 19 and in a walker, and nobody's 19 in a walker. But I had really severe vertigo, so my eyes
Mm.
would dart and I would spin and then fall over. So there was a fear that I, would fall and hit something. So I was walking, in a very not, it wasn't great.
Right.
Cognitively, I had really severe memory issues, short term, long term. There are still parts of like high school and, areas because of 19 parts of high school that I have absolutely no memory of. And they're just kind of gone. Like I don't know why. They're just kind of little blackout times that that just kind of left. And, that is what it is. I went through, fortunately, again, my mom is so incredible. She literally quit her job and drove me around to like 5 different therapies a day. I was in cognitive therapy, I was in balance therapy, I was in, in doing so many different things, as well as like I had a pretty severe neck injury from having hit so hard. So there was a lot of different things, but the brain is very incredible in that it's so neuroplastic. It is willing to change. And unfortunately, with head injuries, right, a lot of times doctors will say, kind of wait it out, right? Like give it time. And it's like, you know, unlike unlike a different type of injury, actually, I believe the sooner the better. Let's start working on it. Let's start flexing that muscle. Let's start increasing that plasticity and basically shaping it in a way that's going to move it in the right direction, which we are able to do, right? We specialize in concussion recovery at Brain Code Center. So now I didn't have access to that kind of back in the day, but I did a lot of other different types of cognitive therapy and like memory therapy to help
Mm.
rehab myself back. And that was incredibly impactful. I did Dynavision. I did vision therapy because I was having pretty severe vision issues. Your
Mm.
occipital area is in the back, right? Your eyes. And so I had some nerve damage. So there was, a lot of different things, but it was honestly more on the natural side, right? That my mom, I was not taking a bunch of meds or things like that. It was all, cognitive type therapies.
Kudos to your mom. You're the second guest that I've had where the mom did not give up on finding the correct solution and just
That's
kind of caving in on, this is how it is. This is what the doctor says, and we're just going to kind of go with that down that path. But it goes to show that there are other modalities, there are other methods out there for whether it is something of the brain. From the other guest, which was a physical therapist, his mom kept looking for a PT and a
yeah.
chiropractor until they found the right solution, the right fit for him. So kudos to your mom. Give her a
Yeah.
high five. Just
Oh man, she's a baddie. She's a freaking
uh,
baddie. She was not taking, she was not taking anybody's answers besides her own.
I love it. Okay, well, I want to actually let's go ahead and start diving into the neurofeedback side. What, if you don't mind, explain what is it? What separates neurofeedback from other therapies, and who is it good for? Who's it not good for? And then we'll then we'll just even dive even further from there.
100%. So what we do is brain mapping and neurofeedback. So neurofeedback is operant conditioning of the brain. It's reward-based training. we're literally teaching the brain to create new neural pathways to serve that person better. So we do start with a baseline QEEG brain map. It's a quantitative electroencephalogram, similar to an EEG or like a SPECT image, except that we're not only looking for structural damage, right? We're looking at the electrical and the neurological wave activity happening. And literally everything shows itself to us in neurological patterns. Anxiety, depression, ADD, trauma, PTSD, brain injury, sleep issues, all of those things manifest themselves within patterns. And that's really what we're looking to see. But we're going to see it through the scope or the lens of brain waves because all humans are capable of producing the same brain waves. Delta, deep, slow sleep, theta, drifting into sleep. Alpha is kind of the bridge. It's a receptor that helps move the brain around. Beta should be clean energy. High beta is fight or flight. And we need it, right? We need all those waves. If we are actually in a state of danger, high beta is what alerts our brain and tells us like, holy cow, I'm not safe. I got to get the heck out of here. If we are trying to go to sleep at night and our brain is lit up with fast wave activity, that's never going to serve us well. If we're trying to be focused and motivated and our brain is producing a ton of slow wave activity, that's never going to serve us well. So really what we're looking at is what the brain is overproducing and underproducing, and then the symptomology that goes along with that. And it doesn't matter if I map somebody on the best day they've had in a while or a kind of crummy day. I'm not only looking at what their brain is producing at that moment, I'm looking at the patterns that their brain has ingrained over the last 20 years. Okay, so I'm looking at, a lot of history. So somebody could even have, a 20-year-old brain injury and, it still leaves imprints. It still leaves, kind of breadcrumbs in the brain that we're able to see. So start with that brain map. I'm very big on education. We go over all of that data with the client to say, hey, here's what we're seeing, here's what's going on. And then we as a treatment team, we create a series of individualized protocols, like training protocols for that person's brain. As their brain map is a fingerprint to them, no two will ever look the same. No two sets of protocols can look the same. It has to be tailored. So we create protocols so that either when they come into the office, we do have clinics in Denver, Dallas, Tulsa. If they come into the office, I place little electrodes on their head. If they're doing the remote program, they have a headset at home that they are utilizing that has electrodes already embedded into it. Honestly, the neurofeedback, it works very similar if you're in person or remote. It just depends on, kind of where you're located and what your schedule is like. But the electrodes are going to pick up the information, the electricity, and the feedback loop of neurofeedback is the electrodes pick it up. It goes into an amplifier, into software. If you're remote, it's an app on your phone, and then gets fed back to you through visual and auditory reward, watching, listening. Those things are very much working as a mirror for your brain, that your brain gets to experience in real time what it's doing and training itself. Key component, there's never any electrical stimulus, going into somebody's brain. There's no shock, anything, nothing's going in. The electrodes are only picking up information, right? And then essentially we're using those exterior forms of reward stimulus to only reward the brain when it's producing the wave activity that is favorable to that person. Think puppy with treat. Tell it to sit, give it a treat. It repeats the behavior because it wants the reward, right? Eventually we can take away the treat and it still knows how to sit, as now that's a new neurological highway. It's all operant conditioning. And so we do those things enough times over time that we commit those new patterns to permanency. So neurofeedback is not like medication. It doesn't have a shelf life in the brain or in the body. It's teaching the brain to do it on its own.
And for those who are just tuning in, and maybe, you don't know my own personal deal, is that I have gone through what is now recent, it was called dysthymia, but now recently, I guess it's now persistent depressive disorder, or PDD. And I'm undergoing, as full disclosure, at Brain Code Centers, but I'm doing the virtual side of it. And so the headband that Angie just showed is the crown. That's, I think they call it the crown. Like, that's what I'm wearing, my crown. Yep. And for those of you who are wondering, first of all, like, let's say you've been on antidepressants, or, you're going through CBT, or you're going through counseling or what have you. This is very different because of my own personal experience. I've done this once before in a year and a half ago, I think is what it was recorded last. And I literally felt, after 14, 15 years, literally felt like there was a light switch that went on in the back of my brain, and I finally felt energy kicking back on. Now I'm going through this other protocol, this new protocol now, just to start cleaning up stuff here on the left side of my prefrontal cortex. Guys, I'm telling you, this is the weirdest sensation, because even though I think the last video I watched was something about like Parks and Rec and all the bloopers of the cold opens. But even when I was done, even though I'm just sitting there and I'm just watching a screen going black, or I can watch, it comes on like a regular video. By the time I'm done, my brain is so fatigued. It's almost like I've been working on a really hard math problem for, hours. and the only thing I wanted to do was just kind of take a nap and sleep afterward. And I'm only 6-7 sessions in. So it is very different. And Angie, you can correct me on this too. From my understanding is that if you are on antidepressants, and please, by all means, consult with your doctor and your medical professional on this first, because we need to make sure that everything is cohesive in your healing journey. But what's different with this is that the neurofeedback does nothing to brain chemistry. So because if I'm understanding right, if you take medication, it may take like 12, 15 days before your brain even starts adapting to the neurotransmitters firing back and forth. Isn't that correct with medication? It might take a while before brain adapts to it.
It can, right? However, something like, if it's a benzo or something like that, it's going to go in, it's going to flood. The difference with medication, right? And if you've ever been prescribed medication, and let me just preface, like, for all the people, there is no shame in the medication game, all right? We are not here to shame any medication. No on that. You do what you got to do, right? However, if you have ever been prescribed medication, did anyone do a brain map before they prescribed you medication? Like, I would probably bet all of my money that they didn't, right? It is kind of throwing spaghetti against a wall. I had a conversation with a mom the other day, and she was like, Angie, I went to the pediatrician. I told her, we talked for 2 minutes, and she was like, this kid's 5. She was like, she needs to be on Adderall. I'll prescribe it to her right now. And she was like, you don't want like a little more information? You don't want anything else? You just want, like, I just told you 2 things and you want, and she was like, well, I'm sure she has ADHD. First off, ADHD is like the most misdiagnosed thing that I see ever, but it's kind of throwing spaghetti against a wall and seeing what sticks, right? So you might be taking like a medication that isn't actually an anti-seizure medication, but is also prescribed as an anti-anxiety, which is also, and now you're taking medication to counter the side effects of this medication. That can be a very vicious cycle to be in. But you are right that that's more, targeting specifically, let's say like your dopamine receptors, your serotonin receptor, something like that, versus neurofeedback is directly affecting your wave activity and your neurological patterns. Now, it also does have impact on things like cortisol, right? Your stress hormone, things like that. But no, it's not putting something synthetic in.
Yeah, and it's please, by all means, you can do research. I'll make sure I'll link up Angie's information too, so you guys can reach out to her and ask questions, because this is so, in my experience thus far, is so revolutionary, because it's almost as though, similar to what that mom just told you, right? It was almost like, let me just throw the pills at this for the solution, and not even consider other ways of doing stuff. But neurofeedback isn't mainstream. Do you have any theories as to why that is? Because it's just, I don't know. It should be mainstream.
Yeah. So 10 years ago, when I was giving presentations, I'd walk into a room and I was like, has anybody heard of brain mapping and neurofeedback? And it was like crickets. Now I would say in a room of 10 people, maybe 3 or 4 are going, I've heard of it. I had a friend who did it, brain training. So it is becoming, if you're in kind of the wellness sphere, I would say it's slightly more mainstream. The reality is big pharma is real. The reality is that there is a lot of money in that, right? And so like that makes sense to me, right? That, nobody is saying, basically neurofeedback is ultimately to find a long-term solution, right? Even medication is designed to be more of a short-term fix, right? Like, hey, maybe let's take this for X amount of time. And then people end up on it for, 20 years. And it's like, what the heck? Neurofeedback is truly to find the long-term. If we get a lot of people off of meds, we're talking like billions of dollars lost in revenue for medication. So I, I have a lot of theories of, why, more natural medicine, more like long-term solutions are not, are not as
Right,
mainstream
not as
because
forthcoming. Yeah.
yeah, that's just the reality of, kind of the world in which we live. But I do believe even in the last like 10 years, I have seen a shift. And I believe that people are no longer accepting like just the answer that is given to them. Like people are digging for more information. People are looking like, I mean, the supplement industry is, has blown up in the last 10 years. So people, I do believe, are looking for other alternative forms of medicine. But you're right, not even enough people know that neurofeedback is an option. When it comes to mental health, it's counseling or meds. Do with that what you will. And we need to change the conversation to counseling, meds, and that freaking brain training thing I heard about.
I love the I love the passion, Angie, and this is exactly why I wanted you wanted you on the show. The now, okay, so I want to help people here in this little segment briefly. So if you're listening to this and you're thinking, oh, this might be an option, an actual viable option for me, because I'm experiencing X, Y, and Z. I'm just going to go off of just my own personal stuff. I'm just going to bullet point it and then tell you what some of the I just found out for the first time after 18 years what, because a clinician found what Angie was talking about, some of these patterns. So I did a brain map. There's a lot of alpha and high beta stuff that's going on in the right side and the back. I think it's just too much of it. Anyway, so my symptoms are low energy, or what was low energy. Higher cognitive abilities were very difficult to process. Planning, organizing, motivation, things like that normally get us going and moving toward a goal, non-existent for a long time. And then just recently, this past week, when I did my check-in, they found that apparently I've been in a freeze state for, I don't know how long now, but a freeze state for the past, I'm going to say at least 5 years, which makes total sense. Just because it almost has a sense of like, I just can't, it's very, very difficult to move forward. Now I'm saying this because for those who may be listening and thinking like, okay, well, how do I know if I'm a good candidate or not? That's my experience. Could you speak to like who else, they may be listening. They're like, how would they know if they're a good candidate for neurofeedback or not?
I mean, gosh, some of the main things that we treat, and I'm using diagnostic terms. Obviously, we're going to do a brain map, as anxiety can come from 50 different patterns of the brain. But if you experience symptoms of anxiety, depression, ADD, trauma, PTSD, brain injuries, sleep issues, if you've had a stroke, I mean, there's so many different things. We work a ton with first responders with complex PTSD. But if any of those things, you're like, man, I kind of feel like, even I feel like self-diagnosing is kind of a big thing in our culture right now, right? You watch a TikTok video and you're like, me. But it's all about symptoms, right? That even if your brain doesn't show a neurological pattern for ADD or ADHD, I believe that you have symptoms of it, right? So rather than let's put your brain on, a stimulant, which is what Adderall and Ritalin are, let's take a look, right? Let's pop the hood and see exactly what's going on. And even if somebody was committed to medication, they were like, I've never wanted to take medication more, even doing a brain map before to see what type of medication would pair with your brain, in my opinion, would be the route, right? That would be the way to go, so that you don't go through the rigmarole, kind of cyclical pattern of like, let's try this, didn't work. Let's try this, didn't work. Up the dosage of this. Like, let's figure out, kind of best course forward, right off the bat. But if you're looking for more of the natural, long-term solution, then, neurofeedback could be a fantastic option.
In your experience thus far, because I was thinking about this when I was going through my session a couple nights ago, have you been able to find, like, is there any differences between men's and women's brains, how they react differently to neurofeedback?
That's so interesting that you asked that, as I truly had like never been asked that. And somebody asked me that the other day. They're like, what's the difference between men and women's brains? I was like, huh, what an interesting question. So no, I really have not seen a big difference between men's brains and women's brains, right? Now, when we're talking about hormones and different things like that, like obviously, men and women are different when it comes to hormones and, biology. Per brain chemistry, it's less about men and women and more about neurological patterns, right? That it's not like, or I would say even not even neurological patterns. I would kind of categorize people more in like professions, right? Why does somebody become an attorney in the first place? Why does somebody become a first responder in the first place? Probably they have a neurological predisposition to X, Y, and Z, right? We're all kind of working within what our strengths are, which is, comes down to neurology and kind of, maybe what you were, gifted with, right? Thanks, parents, for this biology. Also, nature versus nurture, what has happened to us along the way. So I see less men versus women, and I see more patterns. Like if somebody came in and they were like, hey, I have an addiction history and I do, X, Y, or Z for my profession. Let me be so arrogant. I could probably tell you with a pretty high percent accuracy what your brain map's going to look like. Like that would be kind of a fun test, wouldn't it? But, when I meet people, when I do networking, I'm like, I bet you have alpha on the cingulate, so that's more what I would say, that it depends on, kind of patterns, but not really men versus women.
Yeah, I find that fascinating, just because from a personal training standpoint / physical therapy, there are certain, just the way that the body responds and reacts to just certain things, obviously because of the hormones and just the chemistry of each individual is so different, that it just responds differently to, whenever we're attempting to build muscle or whether we're attempting to lose fat or whatever. But fascinating to hear that the brain doesn't matter, male or female. I find that fascinating.
There might be finite details, but it really doesn't, it's not going to have such a big impact. And even with that, right, where everything that we do is completely 100% tailored to that person, right? But I see tons of women with high beta, fast wave activity in the prefrontal cortex, and I see a ton of men with high beta with fast wave activity, in the prefrontal cortex. So yeah, it's not that big of a factor, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Let's kind of pull back about the 30,000 foot view here, because there may be some listeners here and may not necessarily understand brain talk. Some of us who nerd out on this kind of stuff. So if you can, just give general education on, what's the difference between the left hemisphere and the left prefrontal cortex, the right side. You mentioned the parietal lobe. We got the cerebellum. We have amygdala. We got all this stuff that's happening all up in here. But all we know is that we have it, but we don't know how to use it or what happens in each area. So if you don't mind going into that, a little bit of brain talk for us.
Yeah. I won't go super in depth because that would be really boring and I could talk all day. Left brain versus right. It would take a minute. Yeah. I hear from a lot of people like left brain versus right brain. I'm more right brain. I'm more left brain. First off, we're all both, right? We all have to use both hemispheres of our brain. The right side of our brain is more feeling and emotion and attachment style, right? It's happening more in the right side of our brain. The left side of our brain is more linear learning, mathematics, and logic, right? So when I am looking at wave activity, what I don't want is a ton of slow wave activity happening in my linear learning center, right? That's going to make learning really hard. Vice versa. I don't want a ton of fast wave activity happening in my emotion center, right? That's going to make me super reactive, probably have some attachment style issues, probably have some, like emotional regulation issues. The prefrontal cortex is your executive functioning. This is the CEO of your brain, right? We want to make sure that the CEO is functioning well, that you have, like word finding, all of those things. If you have, let's say, a lot of slow wave activity happening in the prefrontal cortex, you're going to feel slow, right? You're going to feel like, oh my gosh, like why am I not, it's like pulling your car out of the garage, going on the freeway. And it's like, I'm only going 30. That's so frustrating. I need to be going at least 60, right? So, or vice versa. If you're going 100 miles an hour in your prefrontal cortex, those are people who I hear say, oh my gosh, something happens and I just fly off the handle. I scream at my kids. I get so frustrated. I'm going from 0 to 100. And then I look at their brain map and I'm like, Well, your brain's never seen zero, right? You're probably going from 80 to 100. 80 to 100 is not a far jump. But if we think we're at zero, because your baseline is your baseline, right? So if your baseline is 80 miles an hour, you think 80 miles an hour is regular because you've never experienced, that's your baseline, right? And if your baseline's 30, you're like, I'm probably going 60. You're probably going 30, so it really is about kind of, educating people. I never in map reviews am going to tell somebody something that they probably don't already know about their brain, but it's like a visual form of grace just to understand, oh my gosh, this is not something that I can just choose, no thanks tomorrow, right? Like, hey, I really want to, I'm thinking no anxiety. I'm just going to flip that little switch.
Yeah,
That'd be
wish
dope,
that
right?
was the case.
That being said, let's just do, well, no, right? That I wouldn't have a job, like mental health, we would just, that would be perfect. That's not the reality, right? Those are very deeply ingrained neural pathways.
Now, have you found within the next set of questions that I have are going to be more kind of physical based on the relation with the brain. Have you been able to find any correlation between, like, when somebody comes in for a brain map and then you look at it and then just realize, homie just needs to go take a nap. Like, it's just sleep. Like, literally the brain is just tired. And so is the person, and it shows, and they just need to sleep. Has that ever come across? I'm sure you probably have run into something like that.
So first off, sleep is one of the number one things that I treat. And if it was as easy to tell that person to go take themselves a little shut eye, sleep is like the most complex and difficult thing for so many people. Oh my gosh. So first off, if like I've met so many people that honestly would tell me if I could change one thing about myself, I would be a champion sleeper. Right. So I have two sisters. They're amazing. They're my best friends. I love them. They both could lay down on a hard wood floor, cement outside, and be asleep within 20 seconds. Oh my God. I'm like, I'm in my bed. I've drank my beam. I've taken my magnesium, lights out, earplugs in, sound machine on, and I'm like, okay, you can do it. We have totally different brain chemistry, right? Like my brain, please, like, Angie, can you take a nap on the plane? Get out of here with that. So for so many people, right, the idea that like, well, just sleep, just go take yourself a little shut eye. They've probably been trying to sleep for the last like 20 years, right? First responders are a big population that they work they work shift work. They're on for 48 hours, then off. Even when they're off, their brain is still on because it's always hypervigilant. I see chronic insomnia, right? Or, they're like, well, I sleep great. And then, they get an Oura ring, track it, and it's like the trashiest sleep you've ever seen in your life. So I see a lot of people who I bet 50% of their problems wouldn't be solved with sleep. They've done everything in the world to try and sleep, right? So neurofeedback is like the biohack for that. Like, hey, you've done all the things, your circadian rhythm, whatever, let's get into the neurology and solve it there.
Yeah, I got some clients that I'm probably going to be sending your guys' way because that's exactly what it is. They're like, I just can't sleep. I just, I wake up all the time. What about, okay, so, yeah, okay, that's really interesting that people still are finding challenging, or that's the issue. Sleep is the issue. Have you been able to find correlations? Like, what is it that's causing? Is it just our culture that we live in that people are just always on, or is it a genetic thing where individuals are just having trouble sleeping? What is some of the things that you found?
I mean, there's so many different reasons, right? Brain injuries. People can have issues from sleeping from brain injuries. Trauma is a big thing for sleep. That if your brain wants to sit in a place of hypervigilance, what's really uncomfortable? Sleep. Because you have to be able to slow down and then shut off. So to literally keep that person safe, their brain's like, don't worry, I'll remain hypervigilant. Oh my gosh, that's not actually helping us at all, right? And that whether that's kids with developmental trauma, whether that's adults with more like PTSD style trauma, you are also right that we live in a highly overstimulated culture. Literally just doing education on circadian rhythm and sleep cycles. I mean, I talk to people who, and are we all guilty of this? Yes. Who are literally staring directly at their phone this far away until the minute they lay down to go to sleep. One, what's that doing? It is blue light directly into your freaking corneas and it's stimulating you, right? It's stimulating your brain, telling you, stay awake, let's get going. And then you shut your phone off and you're like, why can't I fall asleep? Like if you drink a pot of coffee and then lay down, or like, why can't I fall asleep? You probably wouldn't be confused by that, right? You're like, oh, I just put a ton of caffeine into my body. You're putting stimulant directly into your brain. So, I mean, just education around like sleep cycle and, sleep hygiene is really critical. But I mean, there's so many different reasons why people don't sleep. Some people, it's overproduction of fast wave activity, underproduction of slow wave activity. Oddly, some people, it's overproduction of slow wave activity. Having a lot of extra delta, which is sleep wave activity in the brain, does not make us sleep better. It gives us insomnia and some really severe like focus issues and executive functioning. Yeah, it's a really interesting pattern. Usually it's a brain injury pattern, or sometimes brain burnout, like little babies when they're so tired they can't sleep. Yeah, there's tons of different patterns, but that's also the beauty of the brain map, that we don't have to guess. The brain map will tell us what's going on.
Now, moving on, another physical aspect with now using the body is that what have you been able to find correlations? And again, granted, I'm looking at this from a personal trainer / physical therapist eyes and standpoint. Have you been able to find correlations between people's movement and brain patterns?
I mean, not necessarily like yes and no, right? So doing something like yoga, right? Actually, while you're doing yoga, it increases like theta wave activity in the brain. When we're moving in general, right? Like we increase dopamine, right? If we're going for a run, running outside versus running, inside. So yes, movement absolutely impacts our brain. So not necessarily like lifting is better than running is better than like none of that. All of those have different benefits, like incredible benefits. But yeah, I mean, absolutely. So the answer to that is yes, that movement 100% impacts brainwave activity, but it's not like if you go run, that increases like alpha, it's not necessarily like that, but it has incredible impact on the brain. I am pro movement all the time.
That's good to hear. You heard that here first, ladies and gentlemen. Keep moving.
Move all the time. Walking, whatever. Yeah, there is no cap on the movement. Be moving.
And then again, from now also looking at it from a nutrition side. Now, how is people's nutrition and the brain? How has that been correlated?
Oh my gosh, huge, right? Your gut is your second brain. Your brain is your second gut, right? So if you are filling your temple, your body, your vehicle with trash, and I'm going to use the word trash loosely, right? Like highly processed food, tons of sugar, things like that. I mean, I talk to a lot of parents who, they're like, hey, my kid, I saw such incredible impact in their, mood when we cut out highly processed sugar. Yeah, it's like crack for the brain, you know what I mean? So they absolutely, I'm not a proponent of like a specific type of diet, right? I'm not like, oh, carnivore or vegan or, whatever. I'm pro whole foods, like one ingredient food, right? Chicken. That's it,
That's it.
broccoli. Yeah, that's it. Not, mashed into highly processed and whatever else fillers, that they put in it. So I also believe in balance though, that if you 90% of the time, 80% of the time are eating whole foods, you do you, the other, 20 to 10 to 20%. Unfortunately, that's really not our culture. It's not 80%, whole foods, natural cooking at home. Like we really love convenience. And we also love flavor profiles, right? I read a book and I'm forgetting which book it was, I'll think of it, that talked about how highly processed foods like an Oreo is salty and sweet. And it's like so many different flavor profiles. That's why it's addictive, right? That's why we want more because it's so interesting. You could eat 50 Oreos. It'd be really hard to eat like 20 pounds of chicken, right? It is one flavor. It's not that great, like might be a little dry, like, but it's just that one thing. So it doesn't like confuse your taste buds and your brain and all these things. Versus like highly processed dyes and food that your body, one, can't even digest, are so interesting that's what makes it addictive.
Yeah, for sure. That's so true. I think a lot of times, especially with this is a really interesting phenomenon that I've only recently encountered with coaching clients, is the entertainment factor in everything that we do, and this entertainment factor is also somehow applied to our food. And just kind of like what you said, like if it's something that's chicken, if it's a chicken salad and all it is chicken and literally salad, right, without anything necessarily added to it for that extra flavor, then it
Yeah.
becomes right. It becomes boring or not entertaining. And now I'm kind of going through this, because even coaching clients through nutrition stuff, they're like, yeah, but that just sounds really boring. Like I get bored really fast. And I'm
Mhm.
thinking, like, really, is boredom the small, like, can you pay the small price of boredom for your long-term health? I feel like that might
Also,
be,
I feel like we need to change our view of boredom, right? First off, your taste
yeah,
buds can be trained. Just like anything else, your taste buds can be trained. So if you, when people are like, "Oh, I don't like those foods," you can change your like taste profile. If you
yeah,
start eating those foods, I assure you, you will start to crave a freaking carrot. Like I know that for some people it might be like, "There's no way." I crave the sweet taste of like a big, not baby carrots, don't even tease, like a big fatty carrot that you cut up. Like it has such an incredible flavor profile.
it does.
I'm telling you that honestly. I honestly eat carrots all the time because they are so delicious. Versus if you are accustomed to eating pizza all the time, of course a carrot's not going to sound as interesting. You
Yeah.
you are absolutely capable of changing your taste buds.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm just going to go ahead and let, both Angie and I are coming after you. Just know that we're going to make sure we go. You
We're
will eat
coming
the
after your
carrot.
body, we're coming after your brain, we're coming for you.
Yeah, that's right. Angie, that's awesome. And as we're coming to the end of the show, first of all, thank you so much, and love your passion. Thank you so much for sharing the information with neurofeedback and what you do. Where can people find more information about you? If people have questions about neurofeedback, and at least those who are in Denver, Dallas, and Tulsa, if I remember right, how do they connect with you, Brain Code Center, all that stuff?
So first off, we service people across the world. So you do not have to be in one of those cities to do neurofeedback with us, especially with the remote program. We can do a remote brain map, all the things. A great place to start is either our website or our Instagram. At Brain Code Centers, plural, is our Instagram. BrainCodeCenters.com is our website. All of our consultations are free. So we are never going to charge you anything to kind of learn what your options are and learn more about it. My business partner, Rachel, and I do 100% of the consults for Brain Code Center. So literally you have to talk to either Rachel or myself. And we're going to walk through, kind of your specific symptomology, what you've been through. Like both Rachel and I are licensed professional counselors as well as neurospecialists. So we want to get into the nitty gritty and, kind of create a plan for you around how can we improve your life? How can we give you life transformation change? So yeah, Instagram or our website are a great place to start.
Fantastic, and I'll make sure that I'll have those links below so that everybody will be able to reach out to them. And just know, when I first reached out to them, Angie, literally, it was her. It wasn't an AI bot. It wasn't. It wasn't somebody else. Like Angie was the person. So she's not kidding. It's going to be her or Rachel that are going to reach out to you, which is the other thing that I loved about Brain Code Centers, is just because it was just that personal and something I wasn't expecting, and really appreciate it. Okay, well, let's get to the last question, Angie, and it's this is, for the most part, like, let's say this is your last podcast, your last recording. You have a microphone, and this is being broadcast throughout the rest of the globe, and this is your final message to humanity. What is that message that you would tell people?
Oh my gosh. Never stop learning.
Mm.
Never stop just gobbling up information. I strive to be a lifelong learner. I know that that's what increases plasticity in the brain. I believe that that's what fights off illness and degenerative issues with us. So if you can do anything to benefit your brain, be a lifelong learner.
I love it. Thank you so much for that message. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us here again for another great episode of Renegade Radio. Again, the information will be linked below. And until next time, this is Coach Steve saying never conform.